Welcome to Roll to Save, the RPG history podcast. SLA Industries.
Hello and welcome to another Roll to Save Roundtable. I have got Steve and Jason here as usual. Gents, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Still bemoaning the rugby a bit, but full of Sunday roast and got a beer in my hand and looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, we've already agreed that we're not going to talk about the rugby for reasons of Jason's mental health. What about you, Steve? How's it going across the pond?
It's gone pretty good. I guess we're probably not going to be talking about the football either, Ian. So
no, we're not. The football's
yeah, I try. Football is off topic with my dad as well right now.
So, what gaming stuff have you chaps been doing the last few weeks? I mean, it's been almost a month since we had our last podcast, and Jason, you were heavily D&Ding.
Slightly less D&D. Still doing a lot online. Got a mate of ours, Sandy's just started off a Dark Heresy campaign for us. So that's kind of quite nice. Do like a bit of grimdark. That, and I've been hemorrhaging cash into Kickstarter for Merg Borg. So I've literally, if it's got a yellow background, it's getting bought at the moment. But
I haven't been even guilty of that as well.
I've actually played it.
I get freaked out by the rulebook the other night because it's on my bedside table because I've been reading it. What I didn't realise is it has glow-in-the-dark writing down the side.
Oh, awesome.
And I woke up randomly about 3 a.m. and looked over. I was like, what the hell is that? That weird, strange Scandinavian horror game.
Yeah, looking forward to getting it and giving it a try.
What about you, Steve? Other than your mountain of painting that you've done nothing with, what else have you done?
Yeah, to be fair, I've been sort of house sitting for the last 3 weeks as my wife's been out of town. Hopefully she'll be back in a couple of days, which would be nice because I've been mostly binge watching crap on Netflix. But other than that, we've been doing a D&D Rick and Morty one shot with my kid and a couple of friends, which has been an interesting experience. As I'm not a Rick and Morty fan at all, but some of them are, so they get all the jokes. I'm like, it's a little weird, but
because you're old.
Yeah, it's because I'm old and I don't get Rick and Morty. That's been entertaining. And just yesterday, I got to do another run of Arkham Horror, which we lost horribly. Played a Marvel Villainous. I don't know if you guys have ever played a Villainous, but that's actually a really interesting board game system.
I've just picked it up actually. I just picked it up this couple of days ago. The Disney one, not the Marvel one. So it's the same thing. It just looked kind of interesting, and I fancy being the bad guy for a change.
Yeah, I own the Disney one, and my kids own all the Disney expansions too. But like the Marvel one it's definitely worth looking at apparently because they tell me there's a lot of interesting new mechanics in it, and it was a blast. It was good times. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, like Jason, I blame Matt after our last podcast when we talked about Borg and the fact that he was like, oh yeah, there's all these Kickstarters out there. I may have backed quite a few of them. And the problem is they're all really reasonably priced. So you're like, oh, that's only $15. I'll put that in there. And then you realize...
I think one was $3 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Why wouldn't you? It's the price of a cup of coffee.
Did you back the one that's a record?
No.
I may have backed that. I don't have a record player. I've not owned a record player in
exactly. My turntable's in the loft. That's not happening. So
yeah. Anyway, we're not here to talk about what we're doing because we have two very special guests with us because this is our SLA Industries Roundtable. We are delighted, and Jason and I will try and keep our fanboyism under control, but we have got Jared, Earle and Mark Rapson from Nightfall Games here to talk SLA Industries with us. Welcome, gents. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. It's been a busy day. We're looking after 3 children in lockdown, as it has been for the last however many months or years it is now. But otherwise, been good. I like you guys, have just had a lovely roast dinner, so I'm nice and full. So if I do fall asleep mid-conversation, it's nothing personal.
Hi, and I'm Jared. That was Mark. So you can tell our accents apart, even though we're both English, in spite of the fact we work for a Scottish games company. Me, I've been not had a Sunday roast, but I have been doing a bit of gaming, albeit PlayStation instead of actual role-playing.
Hey, nothing wrong with PlayStation games. Yeah. I was to Elite Dangerous recently.
Oh, right. I've been playing that. I actually backed that when it first came to Kickstarter. I got my first name as my commander name on the PC. Nice. But on the PlayStation, so I'm Commander Jared on PC and Mac, but I'm Commander Jared Earle on the PlayStation. You'll find me flying around with them sometimes.
My son is an avid video gamer. He loves video games. And my wife is not. And my wife has seen me playing Elite Dangerous, and she's like, this is the most deathly boring game. You just fly around, you don't seem to do anything, you just seem to dock places. And my son, who loves video games, he sat down with me once like, why are you mining things? This is boring, Dad. Go and fight people. I'm like, it's because I'm terrible. I'm rubbish at fighting. So, gents, I'll ask you both the same question we ask everyone who comes on the podcast the first time. When did you get involved in RPGs? What was your first game, and what got you dragged into the hobby and eventually, in your case, publishing?
I think I started, I can't remember if it was 1979 or 1980 in secondary school. A friend of mine got a copy of D&D, and that was pretty much it from then on. I then played D&D for a bit. Then I moved from my school to France with my brothers, and me and my brothers played D&D for an awful lot. Hello, Scott and Elliot. And then I moved back to the UK a couple of years later and ended up in Nottingham, where I sought out more D&D and ended up at the Asgard Miniatures Games Club. At the back of the Asgard Miniatures was one of the old original miniatures companies that made fantasy miniatures in the early 80s. I think late 70s. And they had a games club that ran in the back of their shop every Saturday. And I'd already decided I was going to help out in the shop on Saturdays, whether they paid me or not, because I wanted to be around gaming. And then I ended up helping out with that games club. People like Jez Goodwin of Games Workshop, who makes miniatures, was actually one of the players there. His character sheets were gorgeous, all pencil work and very nice. And then that split from the shop when the shop got closed down, and carried on with that club. Then I eventually got a job at Games Workshop in 87, I think it was, as a mail order troll. But it got me, I then started knowing all the guys from Workshop because of it, and hanging out in the Salutation and the other pubs where the workshoppers used to go. Nottingham was the place to be in the 80s. And then after that, I went back to college thinking, now I've worked for Games Workshop, I now need to make something of my life. And I went back to education and went to art college for a couple of years, studied fine art history and graphic design. I helped out a friend of mine who was he was one of the ex-Workshop Eastwood guys called John Marshall. He ran a company called Armchair Sales, and they did the sales for Fantasy Forge, which is a resin fantasy miniatures and other stuff. They did a game called Cryomech, and they moved me up to Scotland to help them out doing the typesetting, and because I was doing DTP at the time and they were all still manual. So I helped out with the layout and the typesetting of that book and did some of their computer stuff, their database management, and all that sort of thing. After Cryomech came out, they no longer needed me or this other guy that I was working with in the back of the shop called Dave Alsop. And we were both there for reasons like I was there to do graphic design and typesetting and book production, and he was there to do art. Neither of us ended up doing the jobs we were supposed to do at the end. And both of us ended up not being there very long after the book came out, and we weren't really needed for that sort of stuff. Dave went back to live in Ayr, which is on the west coast of Scotland, and I ended up staying in Edinburgh for a bit. And then one fortuitous day, I was going to sign on, because unemployment was rife back then. And Chaz Elliott, who's another ex-Games Workshop, he did the graphic design for Chainsaw Warrior and all sorts of things like that. And he was the designer at Fantasy Forge. And he was driving past in his little yellow Mini. It was a rust bucket, beautiful little Mini. Mark loves his Minis as well, so there seems to be a thing about guys in Minis. And he said, I'm going to meet Dave Alsop for lunch. He's wanting to ask me questions about a new game. Do you fancy coming along? And that was it. And then Dave and I met for lunch at the pub with Chaz and Anne, who was the third Nightfall partner, if you've read your histories. And me, Dave and Anne started discussing everything. Chaz left us to it, and then they brought me on to help out with the book. And then very shortly after, it was clear that we were then a three-way partnership instead of just those two. And I sort of moved to Dave's couch. I was then between homes as we decided we were going to all move to Glasgow. So I dropped my Edinburgh flat, ended up on Dave's couch for a few weeks before we all moved to Glasgow and shared a flat. Technically 6 of us in the flat, and that was Nightfall Games. And we basically did SLA Industries. And that's how I got into it. The only reason that we did it is because we saw how easy it was to do a book on with Cryomech, that we thought, well, we can do this. And nobody told us that it was a big undertaking and that we shouldn't do it because it was too risky. So we just did it. And because we just didn't understand that it was a stupid idea, I mean, really, it was, that we just did it. And it turned out that we actually had something that people wanted to see.
It's interesting what you say about staying in Dave's couch. I know that in First Ed, Dave's couch actually gets a credit in the acknowledgements at the beginning.
A lot of people stayed on Dave's couch. When we moved to Glasgow, Dave had the living room because we drew straws. I ended up literally in a cupboard. I shared a cupboard with the fridge. And Dave had the couch because he said he would put up all the guests. And there were a lot of them. There was all the artwork ended up on Dave's wall. And we had to, when we took it off the walls, we realized just how cigarette stained they all were. We all smoked. Well, Dave was the only one that didn't smoke. I mean, none of us smokes now, but back then it was normal.
Well, and what about you, Mark? What route did you take?
Oh, mine's very different, especially to role playing. So I am the youngest of the team of Nightfall now. I'm about 5 years younger than Dave and a little bit more younger than Jared. I got into role playing games a little while ago, only probably 3 or 4 years ago, when I heard about this game called SLA Industries. Prior to that, I had played a couple of times, but absolutely despised the format. I thought role playing was just stupid. I just didn't get it, hated it, but I was much more into miniature gaming. So I'd spent a lot of time in my teenage years painting models, much like we've been talking about already today. And then I started to play those games with just a friend. But this was at the time of Warhammer 2nd Edition, fantasy version, and it was just incomprehensible to me or my friend. And so we just made our own version of it. Played that. We used to go to his house or my house and spend 3 or 4 days playing these mammoth games of miniatures. They weren't Warhammer, they were our version of it. And then I went to university, stayed there for 8 years in total. I wanted to earn some pennies, so I went and became a sales person and eventually a marketeer in the biological industry. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, got approached by a guy at my local gaming club who asked me if I wanted to get involved in making a miniatures game, which was a game called Warzone Resurrection. Warzone has historic connections to Nightfall loosely as well. But anyway, I got into that. We produced that game, really had a lot of fun. I did a lot of the writing, although not the rules writing. And then I set up on my own. I'd made my own game called Devil's Run. And then as I got to know people behind Daruma Games, which I know you're planning to talk about later on, and then they got themselves into trouble, and I came along and met Dave and Jared, and the rest, as they say, is history from there. So my background is very different. And then as a result of getting into SLA, I now play D&D at least once a week, and I play SLA now once a fortnight with a group of players that are really into it down in the South Coast. But the joy of Roll20 and Discord means that you don't have to be in local vicinity right now.
Yeah, I think Roll20, if they were a traded company, their stock would be incredibly high at the moment. I know, I mean, Steve and I, we play in a group, and we've made a ridiculous use of Roll20. You know, Jason's done the same. When you were talking about SLA and the way that you got involved with it, and how you mentioned it, Jared, that even though it seemed like a very foolish undertaking, you had something which people liked. One of the actual reasons that Jason and I became friends was through SLA Industries. We were both playing in a vampire White Wolf game, and I'm not quite sure what Jason made of me because I turned up late, surprisingly. Made my entrance by putting on a very strong Glaswegian accent and hurling profanities at all and sundry. But we got talking in the break, and he mentioned that he liked SLA Industries, and I was like, I like SLA Industries, let's be friends. And for people who like it, I think I mentioned it in the main podcast, SLA could very easily just have disappeared. It was what at the time seemed like a very, very niche game, and it got bought by a bigger company, but then the bigger company divested themselves of it. But it's just kept going. It has a certain something that people who are fans of it absolutely love it. And one thing that always makes it really unique, certainly to me, is the artwork. That you look at that first edition book, and I think anyone who bought it back in 93, it was like nothing you'd ever seen before in terms of the art. There are other sci-fi games out there. There are other dystopia games out there. But this particular one had a certain feel to it. Now, you mentioned, Jared, that all the artwork got hung up on Dave's wall. What came first? Was it the vision for the artwork, the concept for the game, or was it something that was more blended over time?
SLA Industries mostly came from Dave's head before I met him. He showed me a couple of the old 2-inch high doodles that were characters of SLA while he was at Fantasy Forge. So I'd say that the ideas and concepts came first, but because Dave is an artist, it was whether or not the art came first or the ideas came first. It's hard to say because he would have thought the ideas visually as well as the concepts. The art influenced the way we all thought about it, but most of it came from once it had left Dave's head, the rest of it came from what we played in that Glasgow flat and in the air flat before it. Just as we were trying to develop and make the game playable, make the world playable. The visual style of the art was in our heads because we were, like I said, it was on the walls. We were surrounded by it, including some of mine that never made it in the book because I was okay at drawing. But when I suddenly saw Stuart Beale's stuff and Chippy's stuff, and obviously Dave's stuff as well, that it was all there, I realized that no matter what I did, I'd never be as good or, more importantly, as quick. I could do a nice picture, but it would take forever. And my skills were much better set put in other directions. It was a waste of my time to try and be an illustrator for SLA. But the idea is it was a very visual world we lived in, and that set some of the tone. So I'd say pretty much it was probably the ideas that formed the art that formed the ideas.
I think as well, having spent a lot of time now with both Dave and Jared, I think one has to remember that Dave, this is what Dave thinks about pretty much all the time. You know, he's got a day job, which is artwork, but he is literally thinking and concepting stuff in and around SLA every single minute, pretty much, of the day when he's awake, and quite possibly while he's asleep as well. And I think this is something that, therefore, the depth of the game and the nature of the game and the scope of the game is so much bigger than pretty much anyone else could do, because, you know, we've got other things going on. We haven't got that commitment to the game itself, and Dave really has. And Jared and I get the opportunity to sort of help create by allowing him. He allows us to we bounce things off each other. He talks through things with us, and also, to be fair to Jared as well, he's also been absolutely critical to this. I mean, I think my feeling is that a good creative always needs a best mate to talk to, someone to bounce ideas off of, and that's the role that I think Jared has played absolutely blindingly over the last 30 odd years, not only because they are best mates, but also because they love to talk about it. And, you know, I've been to pub meetings with them, and I know they go to pub meetings with other people, and the conversation is always about SLA, and it's been that way for 30 years because that is what Dave always wants to think about and does think about.
The reason that SLA Industries second edition was able to happen was, I mean, a lot of the ideas were discussed over the last 10 years in pubs. And that's one of the things that's been hard about this pandemic, is that we can't go. I see Dave once every 6 months right now. I mean, we talk a lot. We're on constant chat all the time, Facebook Messenger, whatever. But we haven't been to the pub and taken the story further. Because there's about 20% of the stuff that we discuss in the pubs makes it into the book. A good 80% gets discarded, but it gets discussed through that. And then we have our Nightfall meetings where the books themselves, and that's where Mark came up recently to, weirdly, to... I'll tell you this story. It's a funny one. Mark wanted to have a SLA Industries team meeting, a Nightfall Games team meeting, which we thought was a very, very good idea. We've had one before, a little retreat where we go and get an Airbnb, and we stay there for a few days and we bash out ideas and we nail down what stuff is going to be.
And we drink beer and we eat food.
And we drink beer and we eat food, and we then go out to the pub. We then go out to a nice Indian restaurant, Air India. Very good. So Mark wanted to do this in Scotland, because the last one we did was down in England. So he found somewhere on the west coast of Scotland, which is really close to Glasgow and to where my little village, I'm in a village called Muirkirk, which is on the A70. And he found this place called Air. Dave and I said, yeah, we know Air. We know Air. We started Nightfall in Air. And so he then got this Airbnb. We turned up, and the view out of the window was the same view out of the window that we had 2 doors down in Dave's old flat. The Airbnb was literally 3 windows away, second floor, same floor, 3 windows to the right of where Dave's flat was. It was uncanny.
And it was that was absolute sheer chance, because I had no idea that SLA started in Air. I had no idea of any aspect of that. And obviously these guys didn't know that I was booking it in Air. I just said, I booked it in this place called Air. I never heard of it. Seats sound nice. It was near Jared, and that was it. And then it turns out it's basically next door to where SLA started. So scary.
I believe the term is serendipitous.
Yes. Very much so.
I like what you say about the sort of almost constantly evolving aspect of SLA, because you can see that in the journey it takes, that every time SLA went elsewhere, there was a little evolution of material coming out, the setting of the timeline, which I think most games need. I mean, you'll see the games that really flounder are the ones who Second Ed comes out and it's the same as First Ed. It's just got different art in it. Whereas SLA has changed, it's evolved. I remember when Karma first came out. For those of you listening who have never seen Karma, I will always rave about Karma as a source book, because the way Karma was constructed is 90% of it was in-world fiction and articles. It was designed or it seemed to come across as a SLA operative's lifestyle magazine. It's the sort of thing you'd buy in world to find out what the latest and greatest was coming from SLA Industries. And the rules were sort of crammed away at the back. And as I said on the main podcast, nowadays that's quite a common device, but back then that was completely revolutionary. I hadn't seen any other companies who'd done anything like that. It managed to maintain that same stylistic integrity that the original had, whilst introducing new things. Moved the plot along, it moved the world along, there were inventions. I know that I had one player, as soon as he got his hands on Karma, was like, I want to play a Vevaphon. Can I be a Vevaphon? And I'm like, oh, bloody hell, I have to go and read up on these things. And that was a bookkeeping nightmare, but he had a lot of fun with it. It's always seemed to evolve slightly every time something new's come out. I mean, Jason, you own virtually everything SLA related. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I think it's a spot on assessment. I mean, every time you got something new, it was like the date moved on a bit. And actually, that's even more true with the version 2, because what is it, 15 years later or whatever, from the 900 SD that we're used to in First Ed, it is like it's constantly evolving. I was kind of really hoping with First Ed, certainly when Karma turned out, we'd get more of the same that came after it, and we'd get one for Science Friction, and we got Dark Lament, and so forth. And we get different, each one would be from one of the subsidiaries, and you'd get all the information on that stuff. But sadly, that never happened, but still got great hopes that might happen in version 2, guys, just a suggestion.
Well, the reason that the style of books changed after Karma is, if you look at the credits, you'll see that Dave and I didn't do as much. I wasn't involved in the book production for Mort, for instance, at Wizards of the Coast. I was sidelined to the IT team while Dave was sidelined over to Seattle. And it was, neither of us were actually involved in the day-to-day running of the Nightfall design team as it was then. And that, we think that shows.
Definitely shows.
Yeah.
I'm telling you it shows.
I would say that the one that it shows most in is the Cubicle 7 Cannibal Sector 1. Because
yes.
I bought that. I got Jason that for his birthday because I'm a good friend. And I was reading it after I bought a copy for myself. And I'm like, this doesn't feel SLA Industries. And especially when you got to, there was I won't spoil it for anyone who might want to read it, but there's a platinum BPN included. But you read through that, it just doesn't seem to gel with stuff that's gone before. Artistically, it looks incredibly different. And I believe that was the last thing Cubicle 7 released for SLA Industries.
I think Hunter Sheets 1 might have come after it.
Was it? Okay. But
I don't know, actually. You might be right. Well, there are several reasons it doesn't feel right. The first being it's print on demand. And I have opinions on print on demand. I think it's a great idea that I will never use. It's a brilliant idea. Print on demand is revolutionizing the way that role-playing games are made, because people can have smaller print runs. I don't like print on demand. And it's purely for personal reasons. I like to have a lot more control over the printing, which is why if you look at CS1 and if you look at SLA Industries 2nd edition, they are very, very shiny books.
And you mean by CS1, you mean the new CS1?
The new CS1, yeah. I'm going to now finally tell the tale of the glue for SLA Industries.
Okay, folks, this is an exclusive for all SLA fans who have joked about this all throughout the years. Tell us about the glue.
Me and my girlfriend, now wife, drove down to the printers.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is big news. So how long have you guys been a couple without being married?
27 and 3/4 years.
How long have you been married?
3 weeks? 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Hey,
2 weeks now.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Better late than never.
We started going out, I think, a week after Nightfall Games officially became a company in April 1993. I couldn't drive. She has a car. So I got her to drive me down to the printers. This is immaterial, but it shows how you get a book printed back then. I took my Atari ST that all of the book layout was done on with the hard drives. Were they hard drives? No, they were floptical drives, 20 megabyte floptical drives running off a SCSI bus. And I took them down to the printers because the printer said they could accept PostScript. And this is 93. This is early DTP years. And I plugged the stuff into their system. They couldn't get it to work. But I left them with the printed out book layout, which had basically off the inkjet printer every page of SLA. And the printer started looking through that, and they looked, okay, we can do this. And then suddenly I saw their faces drop. And they said, there's a lot of black in this book, isn't there? There's a lot of ink. You're doing more black ink than we would normally do on pages. And he says, yeah, we're full bleed black with black background with everything, this, that, and the other. So they said, this won't work. We can't do it on the, I think it was 80-gram cartridge they were originally planning on, 80-gram, very low China paper they were going to do. And they said, but we do have paper that will take this amount of ink. And they had some art cartridge, a lot of it, which is basically drawing paper, the stuff you would get from, which is why whenever you see a signed copy of the SLA book, you can sign it in pencil, you can sign it in pen. It signs beautifully because it's printed on drawing paper. And we paid normal paper prices for very, very high quality paper so that we wouldn't get too much buckling, or they wouldn't have to reduce the amount of ink or anything. So they printed the book on art cartridge. The problem was that is very, very hard to glue in because it's not the same sort of paper they were anticipating on using perfect bound. They would normally do something like saddle stitch or other blah, 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 technical. They wouldn't normally do that sort of thing with that sort of paper. And because of that, the glue wasn't as strong on the paper as it should be. And there you go. That's why SLA. Now, if you go and have a look at your original copy of SLA, the first orange cover, as it's called, even though it's not orange. Now, check out the actual paper in it and feel that and think of it as drawing paper. And you'll suddenly realize, oh, hang on, that's very nice paper.
I've got quite an amusing story. I picked up Mort via eBay, brand spanking version of Mort. And I this was when I started to get into it. And it arrived through the door. You could tell it was never been opened, it never been read. And I thought, I'm going to sit down and have a cracking read. And what I did was I opened it up and there was a big crack and all the pages fell to the floor because basically the glue had failed. So my cracking read was just that, but just not in the way I was hoping for.
So what I want to ask you about next is, obviously, 93, you release SLA Industries.
Yep.
It proves to be very popular. And then this little-known games company called Wizards of the Coast, that I think they were doing something in the early 90s involving cards. They come in,
some weird thing.
Yeah, some weird thing that I've got involved in Magic Arena, actually. My son and me have both got involved in it, and I'm like, oh no, this is going to be another money sink.
The reason we met Wizards of the Coast is we wanted to be in the trade hall for European Gen Con, or Euro Gen Con 93. We really wanted to be in the trade hall so we could sell SLA. We took far too many books. We have no idea what we were doing. It's our first proper big convention. We basically wanted to have a trade stand, which we could then man all day. But instead, what happened was they chucked us at the back of the demo hall because we were late booking and they sold all their good spots. So they put us in basically purgatory, where we'd have a table to sell things on. And 2 stalls to our left was another company they'd also put in purgatory, a little-known company called Wizards of the Coast. And they were literally flogging magic off their stall to anyone who would come along. They had, I think it was beta they were selling, or alpha. There was some alpha left, but it was mostly beta cards back then. One of the reasons they sent over one of the bosses, they sent over Lisa Stevens to manage the stall, who now runs a company called Paizo. But she came over and she was looking for a company or a partnership that could deal with the money for them to pay Carta Mundi, because they needed somebody in Europe to pay for magic cards, which are printed in Belgium. But they came over and started looking through SLA, and Lisa picked up a copy of SLA, started looking through it and laughing, called someone over and said something comparing us to White Wolf. I can't remember exactly what it was, but apparently we were out White Wolfing White Wolf with the quality of black and white art, which was very, very pleasant coming from her. We didn't realize who she was at the time. And eventually they got talking to us and said, do you fancy becoming our UK office? And this was literally our first convention. And we were outcasts like them at the back of the demo hall and didn't know really what was happening. We'd never heard of Magic the Gathering. And it was only when we went over to Seattle in December that year that we realized what it was. And they were showing us this thing called Antiquities that they were working on. And that was it. That's where it all started.
It was shortly after that sadly Wizards dumped all of their RPG lines, and that was in 95. Was SLA instantly sort of acquired by Hogshead, or was there a couple of years lull there?
Wizards of the Coast decided that role-playing wasn't making as much money as Magic. Somebody from Wizards of the Coast, who was one of the ones responsible for that decision, later said it was the wrong thing because role-playing was still making money, just not Magic money. Of course, they then went and bought TSR a few years later, so they got back into it. It was at European Gen Con, or UK Gen Con, I think it was called, Loughborough, 96, 97, can't remember. But I was there as Wizards of the Coast, I think. And I met with, I think Peter Adkison was there, and he said, "Oh, do you guys want Slay back?" And on Dave's behalf, I said yes. And he said, "I'll give it back to Dave then." That was it. Wizards of the Coast then gave they gave Dave SLA Industries, and we restarted Nightfall Games with a guy called Tim Dodopoulos, who was part of the Nightfall design team on Mort. And he said he would then publish it and look after it. I took delivery of all of the books into my garage from the Belgian warehouse that Wizards sent us for free, which is very nice. So we had some stock. Tim then took over. Dave and I went our separate ways. He went off to work in video games. I went off and carried on my IT career. Hogshead licensed it from Nightfall Games and started publishing it, which we always thought of as vindication, because one of the very first reviews of SLA Industries was James Wallace, who ran Hogshead, wrote a bad review of SLA Industries in his magazine at the time. But we still liked James. I mean, we got on well with James anyway. Never took it personally. And he was probably right on some of the stuff. But then we felt vindicated when Hogshead took over SLA and thought, yeah, okay, we were right.
And it was round about the sort of, I think it was 98, that there was leaked on the internet the SLA Industries Writer's Bible.
Yeah.
I vaguely touched on that on the history episode of the podcast. How did that all come about?
The problem was it was, when we describe it as the Writer's Guidelines, it wasn't even that. It was going to be the Writer's Guidelines. Most people will have a copy of it with some of Stuart Beale's scale drawings. People say, "Oh, where did these come from?" Stuart Beale did some drawings of all the races in sequence with all their heights in silhouette. And that's part of that same pile of documents that was going to be the Writer's Guidelines. We have a pretty good idea of who did it. It's not worth dredging up stuff, but it was never supposed to be released. And they weren't guidelines on what to write. They were guidelines on what the backstory was that we would eventually be telling over books and books and books, that they could then write for Nightfall Games without breaking the future that we were building. Anyone who reads the current second edition SLA Industries will know that we've not given up on where the story should go. The foundation is, how best to put it, there is a foundation that hasn't changed since 1990 something. The telling of it was incomplete when it was in the Writer's Guidelines, and also unedited and what's the best way, not put in the right direction. People was going, "Oh, right, so basically it's all a dream," which isn't quite right, until we then took that phrase and then stuck it on its head by saying that's the way they see it in the world with dream entities.
I remember, Jason, you actually showed it to me because you got it, I think, in 1999 or something, and you're like, "Hey, do you want to come and see this?" And we sat and oohed and ahed over it. I mean, what did you think of it?
And this is the thing. The weird thing is, I'd spent 6 years, I guess, by that point with SLA without that document. Did it matter to how I ran my games? No. Was my truth the same as what was written down in that document? No, still isn't. Right? Okay, and it probably will never be, because that's the beauty of a role-playing game. It's mine. You know, yes, I'm taking the seeds of what Dave and Sharon and all the other people have contributed and produced, but mine will never be the same as yours, will never be the same as Jared's, and certainly won't be the same as Dave's. Okay, so, you know, did it affect me? I guess the problem I had, I suppose, was early on. One of the things that ultimately attracted me to the game when I first saw it was guns kill, but so's the truth. I love a bit of like layered conspiracy stuff going on in games, and the whole fact that there's something more to it. So that hooked me. And then there wasn't a truth in the book. So it was like, okay, now what? And you just had to make it up. But that wasn't a bad thing, I don't think. So, I mean, I've still got it on my file system here. I've just found it. I probably haven't opened that document in, probably since we even looked at it.
I think it's hard to know how to compare it to something that people will understand as to what that document is and what it should be considered as. But I think the best that I've come up with so far is George Lucas, when he wrote Star Wars, he had originally a plan of 9 movies from the beginning. He eventually focused down on what we now know as A New Hope, and then he made the next one and the next one, and then there was a big gap. But the key point is, and this is where it's comparable, the general big broad brushstrokes are what he planned, at least for the first 6 movies. But you look at episode 1, 2, and 3, and it is not anything like he had put out and planned on the documents that have been leaked of his. And, you know, even episode 4, which was the first one he made, the characters' names have changed. Certain characters have changed species. Certain characters don't exist. Certain characters came back later. So, for example, Mace Windu was a name in the first draft that never got anywhere. And then it reappears as a character in episode 1, 2, and 3. And the character of Mace Windu is nothing like what he planned. It's just the name, because Samuel L. Jackson came along and said, I want to be in your movie. And George Lucas says, yes, you can. And you can have a purple lightsaber if you want it. In a way, it was a good marketing idea because we're still talking about it 30 years later. But equally, it's a shame because it does ruin it. And then people condense it down to it's all a dream, which clearly it isn't. It's not basically Bobby coming out of the shower in Dallas. It's so much more complex than that.
It also goes hand in hand what we were talking about earlier with the ever-evolving nature of it. I remember when I first downloaded the data packets that you guys put in Drive-Thru-RPG, I got the Ursa Carrion one first. I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is sort of nasty I can put in the game. Then started downloading the other ones, and you're left like, whoa, hang on a minute. What did I just read there? That's really similar to some of the stuff that was in that document. It's changed slightly. And when you look at the data packet on the Dream in particular, it's got entries in there that are almost having fun with people who were decrying the truth as it was. And you mentioned, Jared, the new rule book. If you're picking up Slave for the first time, you will not notice it. If you're a long-time Slave fan, the opening piece of fiction and the closing piece of fiction are a big invitation to get on board with SLA Industries 2nd edition and see what's coming next.
I wrote that last piece on the last page, but I stole chunks of it from what Dave wrote about the Dream entities in the Cannibal Sector 1 book, the good one, the Cannibal Sector 1 book. But I knew that most people wouldn't have read Cannibal Sector 1. It's a big book and not many people did.
And that's another real shame, really. That book, the second Cannibal Sector 1, the one that New Nightfall produced in 2018, I think it was now. That book is absolutely unbelievable when one looks at the level of detail, the quality, the amount of art, and the fact that probably only 800 people have seen it. It really is a shocker, because that book is just... If you're a Slave fan or you want to be a Slave fan, get that book. It's unfortunately first edition rules, so not the same rule sets, but there is a conversion doc. But that book is just a joy. I mean, the amount of love and effort that Dave and Jared put into it, and then Shep and myself put into it once we came on board, it's just unbelievable that it's not got the love it has. And it should, I'll be honest, it should have won awards. When I look at who wins awards and what they win awards with, that book should be up there.
I've actually got a text I sent to Jason with a picture of the good CS1 book, and I think I entitled it something like, "What am I holding now that makes me cooler than you?" Because I backed the Kickstarter, and I originally backed it for the book, and I mentioned it on our history podcast. Yeah. That was a Kickstarter that very rapidly got out of control with what was being promised versus what it was originally meant to be. And the book is absolutely beautiful. It's full color. It's thick. You could concuss someone with that book quite easily if you wanted to. But
it's the biggest book we will ever produce.
The actual quality of what you've got in there as background is completely new, even compared to the stuff that's in SLA 2nd edition. There's stuff in Cannibal Sector 1 that isn't in SLA 2nd edition. And in fact, that little nod that you have at the end of SLA 2nd edition of the line of "We are all dream entities," that actually crops up at one point in Cannibal Sector 1. And I found myself rereading it. I was like, "Whoa, is this like the biggest spoiler ever?"
The whole Blackwood story that people just completely missed. Doing that Cannibal Sector 1 book proved to us that we could do SLA 2nd edition. If we hadn't have done that, if we hadn't fallen down that path, we wouldn't have ever been confident enough to do second edition, because we'd have thought there aren't enough people. We're not large enough. We'd never get it done in time. If it's just like the data package was me and Dave in the pub.
This is another thing, because I don't know whether you guys were planning to touch on it, but I'll bring it up now anyway. There's quite a few people that have decried Nightfall, certainly in the period after Cubicle 7 and maybe during Cubicle 7, for not producing enough. But when you take into account that it was Dave and Jared 100% doing it in their own time, it's actually quite impressive what they did do. And then we were lucky enough to sort of be in a position to do Cannibal Sector 1 and do it the way that Cannibal Sector 1 was meant to be done in the beginning. I became aware, as I said, of SLA Industries about a year after that Kickstarter had happened. And the reason I became aware of it was that the gentleman in charge, a gentleman called Mark Wallace, I'd become aware of via shows. He used to be a Mantic rep, and then he'd set up Daruma with these guys. So he was my first port of contact. I just set up my company to make miniatures for myself and for other people. We were cost competitive, and we were in a bit of a battle with a colleague of mine who I'm really good mates with, but he was doing a similar thing, and both he and I had come out of Prodos Games, and that's a gentleman called Rob Alderman, who now is in charge of Lord of the Rings and Blood Bowl for GW. So he's done amazing.
Another good lad.
Really good lad. And what happened was Mark Wallace had been using Rob to make his models. He'd also been using Prodos Games, which was the company that I was part of before. So anyway, I got to know Mark Wallace, seemed a nice enough guy. He paid for things. He got us to do design and then casting, etc. So anyway, they came and saw me, him and his brother, who were the two non-Nightfall directors, and asked me to buy into Daruma. And I looked at it and I asked them to give me the due diligence that I would need. So previous bank accounts, etc., all the finances. And they were not able or not willing to give them to me. I believe the first one, not able. And long and short of it was, I realized that there was no way that I could come in and take part of Daruma, because it was a sinking ship. I then spoke, by that point I got to know Dave and Jared a little bit better, and mainly Jared, because obviously Dave doesn't want to get involved in that sort of thing, and fairly so. And so Jared and I talked about it, and I looked at saying, right, well, instead of me doing it as Wordforge, I'll do it with you guys. And then it just became clear that the miniatures was not where it was at to me. You know, the miniatures is a very crowded market, and obviously Slay is a role-playing game. That's what it is. So I said to Jared, and I'm sure he can remember it, look, there's no way I can help you if it's just the miniatures. We've got to be involved in the whole thing. And that's pretty much what we did. I brought in a guy who's a good mate called Chris Shepperson, who he did the rules for Slay second edition, and he was one of our writers. It was bloody hard work. We knew that we were on the solid ground, and we knew that we would prove to people that we were going to make this happen. And as an example, we have done the second edition Kickstarter, and it's out there. Most people have got it. We proved it in our abilities. And I think, unfortunately, Nightfall has been caught up with a number of people that haven't been able to do the job that I fit in this company. As a result, Slay's never really met its full potential. And I might be being arrogant here, but I'm not suggesting that I'm giving it its full potential, but I'm certainly giving it better potential than it had with anybody else.
I think the thing I loved about, I finally had the Kickstarter arrive. So I got the bag, and inside the bag there was a book, there was a bunch of models. The models are still unassembled. The book was the first thing I went for. And I do miniatures war games, and I like painting minis. But that was never what I was in for. I think you summed it up quite nicely. Slay is not a miniatures game. There are tons of miniatures games out there. It's an expensive cutthroat market. You know, if you want to go up against Games Workshop, all power to you, but 40k is still going to dig a grave and just like kick you into it. Yeah. But having a new Slay book was absolutely wonderful. And at the risk of sounding like a complete fanboy, the quality of that book was amazing. I mean, the artwork, the writing, just the way it was produced. I still haven't read the miniatures rules, I have to confess, because they're kind of crammed away at the back. Yeah. But all the other stuff was... I was slightly terrified you included stats for Digger, and then I read them. I'm like, no, I'm never using that in a game. That's horrible.
Well, they're there for completion, and they're there to terrify people, and that's exactly what they do.
The other thing that really stood out, and I'm putting on my nerdy hat here because I've been a project manager for the last 23 years or so, is the communication. When that Kickstarter was in its initial phases, there were communications going out every week. Hey, great news, guys. We've unlocked another stretch goal. We're going to include this exclusive mini and blah, 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 blah. And I was getting more and more nervous every time one of those came through. It's like, stop promising more minis.
Yeah.
They're expensive. They take time to make. But then there were those huge lulls of silence.
Yeah.
And that's what's really difficult as a backer when you get that. And it's the same in, quote unquote, the real world when you're a project manager. If you're not communicating with your stakeholders, they're immediately worrying and coming up with the worst case scenarios. And that's why I said I was never surprised when the email came through saying, oh, we're going to be delayed. Like, of course you're delayed. You've not spoken to us for 6 weeks. However, when Nightfall took over, you guys communicated, I would say, weekly. Not only did you communicate to say, hey, look, we're still here, we're doing stuff. You had a breakdown of, here are our work processes. We have this many pieces of artwork to do. We have got this many pages to set. We've got to proof this. We've got to get this to the printers. And here's the status of them. And you did exactly the same with SLA 2nd edition. And when you have that level of communication, backers don't mind if things slip because you're being honest. I mean, with Cannibal Sector 1, you had to be very honest and say, right, there's a bunch of stuff that's not happening. You guys have to make a choice. Do you want this or do you want that? You can't have both if you want the whole thing delivered. I think that's an incredibly beneficial form of communication to have. I think it's what gets you the loyalty. That's why I think 2nd edition's Kickstarter was such a success, because the people who were on board for that were like, well, these guys talk to us and they give us updates and they're honest about it. I mean, when you consider, even with COVID, the delivery of SLA 2nd edition was pretty much flawless as Kickstarters go. Yes, there was a delay, but when you've got a global pandemic, it's only to be expected.
I don't think it was. I mean, obviously from the outside it would have looked flawless, but we did have some real problems. I mean, Shep leaving was a massive body blow to the team. I mean, we thought that we were a team of 4 and we became a team of 3 overnight. And yes, he had written everything he'd promised to write, and he'd done that quite a long time before, but we missed him when it came to proofreading rules. He was the rules writer. So now we have a gap, or we had a gap in our team with him leaving, because, and again, he offered to help, and he did help us even when he'd left. But the problem was, he's no longer invested in that. He's gone off. He's now doing his own thing, and we were continuing to live it. So there was problems and there was issues, and we had other things as well that caused a few problems here and there. But what we discovered by the Cannibal Sector 1 Kickstarter when we took over was that communication is key. But I do also fully understand how people can get to the point where they can't communicate. I've had a Kickstarter that really has gone not to plan at all, and it can actually be emotionally affecting. You can have like almost panic attacks about going onto that Kickstarter, because again, some people, no matter what, can't remember that this is a person behind this company. They can't remember that there's real life people that have got things going on. I mean, for example, during this Kickstarter, my father was near enough died, and then he had to have a liver transplant, and all that sort of stuff and all that emotion added to the pressure of a Kickstarter that might not be going well, if that was the case, can be detrimental. I mean, unfortunately, I backed a Kickstarter a little while ago called Healer Dice, and the guy behind that died during it. I don't know what he died of, but I think he died of suicide because of the pressure he got under as part of the Kickstarter. And this is the other thing, we had to really have some strong discussions about this, because as I said to you before, this is Dave's life, SLA Industries. And, if we hadn't have made that Kickstarter work and happen, SLA would have been dead, because we'd have lost so many people. We might not have lost everybody. We probably wouldn't have lost everybody. We would have lost enough people that it would no longer be viable. And that was the key thing. And I saw us turning around the mess that was CS1 Kickstarter as a marketing opportunity for New Nightfall to show what it could do. And at that point, New Nightfall was 4 people that were working our nuts off, if you mind the expression, to make this game happen. And Dave had been doing all of this, even though it was so bad before. we took over, Dave had still been pumping out artwork on a regular basis for no money whatsoever. You know, that CS1 book is basically a labour of love from 4 blokes who spent a lot of time, effort and money that they still haven't seen a result of and probably never will. Yeah, as you say, fortunately for us, and hopefully because we showed that we cared and we fixed it, people supported us. And as you say, we did. The Kickstarter was more than double, but when you take into account the pledge manager as well, it's more like triple the amount that the first Cannibal Sector 1 did.
Well, speaking of that, second edition, as I mentioned, has come out.
Yeah.
I have my grubby mitts on my copy.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Steve hasn't because he's an electronic loser, doesn't like tangible things.
Oh.
I couldn't look at the PDF.
You were such a spoil sport with the PDF. I was so excited when the PDF came through, and you're like, "No, I'm waiting till I get my book. I don't want to talk about it just now."
I'm kind of glad I did. Because
it's a lot more popular.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of people do that. A lot of people said, "Well, I'm not getting the PDF. I'm going to wait till it comes out. I'll wait till I can buy it in a shop." Fine, we'll sell through retail. No problem at all.
Oh no,
don't care when you get it.
It was a no-brainer. I was going to get kicked. It was going to get funded, right?
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
I clicked the button. It was like, "Oh, just take my money, please."
Yeah, but we were very much at the so how. Which one of the top tiers are we going to go for then?
Well, it was. In fact, I actually got the top tier, and then they kept adding top tiers.
Yeah.
And it was like, "Oh, guys, I'm going to eat this month." You know.
Well, that was really amusing because obviously we went to Kickstarter with our expectations, and we'd already decided at the very beginning, we would only maximum amount of pages we would have was 224. We would have a GM screen with a 16-page doc. And whatever else, there was very little that came along that was additional. But what did come along that was additional was the 2 different cover versions. The wall one, which is this one here, which I know it's a podcast, so this one was the first one we did. And then as we were doing this, we were talking with a gentleman called Johnny Hodgson, who's a very good friend of Dave and Jared. He suggested we look into these leather-bound ones, so we did. But obviously, at the beginning of Kickstarter, we had no plan for them. So if you're that way inclined, you have a look at the graph for the SLA second edition Kickstarter. It breaks every single rule of a Kickstarter with regards to the shape of the graph, because it's got 2 peaks midway through. And that's because the first one was the wall version of the book. And then the second, much bigger one, which surprised us even, was the leather-bound.
That may be when I changed my pledge.
I really had to struggle. I was like, I want it. It's so pretty. I do kind of regret it now. But.
No,
I'm conscious we're coming up for time here. So I would ask Mark and Jared, both of you, what are your top 3 things in second edition? And I'll start with you, Jared.
Oh, God.
The pressure.
The top 3 things that I would... Index is all Mark. Index has nothing to do with me.
Well, we know it wasn't in first ed, was it?
Nope. Nope. Didn't have the software to do indexes back then.
I don't have it now. It's just my head.
Yeah. Like I said, it's all Mark. Indexes are all Mark. I think people should discover the book by reading it and memorizing it. That's not entirely true. The thing that I liked about second edition, the 3 things that people should notice, that's a really tough question. I think people should read as much of the background as they can because we put a lot of work into it. I also really, really love the GM screen, and I love the Mort map, and I love the fact that we got artists in, the fact that it's not just Dave doing it, struggling, breaking his fingers. It's all based on concept work from Dave, but it's nice to see when you write something and then someone who isn't the guy who normally draws the stuff you write draws it, and you think, oh, that's interesting, I hadn't thought of that. But the things I think that people should read is, for SLA second edition, they should go and buy Cannibal Sector 1 and read it. The 352-page book, it's got so much stuff. So the 3 things, Cannibal Sector 1, the Mort map in the book, the one that's the vertical side. Mm-hmm. Don't try to ascribe too much actual physics to it, because it's an impressionist, detailed impressionist piece. I love the fact that it's the black pages come out properly, the white pages come out properly, and there are some hidden things in there that no one's found yet. There you go.
Oh,
Third thing.
See, that's a
the
challenge
hidden things
now.
that people haven't found.
You can't do that.
For instance, I will tell you the one that I hid in Cannibal Sector 1 before we get to Mark's favourite things. In Cannibal Sector 1, there is a piece of fiction that Dave wrote about the dream entities where they walk into a stadium and every single book is open with a knife through page, says he looking it up, page 33. Anybody got a copy of Cannibal Sector 1 on them? Turn to page 33. And this goes for the listeners at home as well.
Oh, the tension is unbearable.
That's not.
So,
I
yeah.
haven't got mine handy. That's not good.
What a shame.
Oh,
What a
no.
shame. Then I'm going to leave that as an exercise.
Okay, I know what I'm doing as soon as this call finishes.
Yeah, me too.
And just to confirm, it is that page there, yeah?
Yep, that is the one.
Right.
Okay.
Mark, what are your three things?
Well, I think for me, we've got certain things that were talked about by, and we haven't mentioned here, but that got cut. So, for example, Vevathons are no longer, and there's talk of them in the book. They're mentioned, but that is, you can consider that a seed. And all I will say is Progress Report 3. The other thing that I'm really proud that we've got in there is the Gators. The Gators are updated from the originals that were presented via a very small data packet, but I really like them and what they do now. And I like the whole concept of basically Stormers being designed for the job that they're for. So you don't get all these ones that you don't get these silly ones that's everywhere and all the time. You'll get very specific Gators, almost like wild cats or something like that are very specific to the environment that they do. So Gators are on the wall, Grit Stormers are in the cannibal sector. What else will come? Who will know? And then I think, I mean, I am pleased with the index because I think it's a key thing, and hopefully it's useful for people to find what they need. So, to be fair, that was Jared and I, because Jared pulled all the headings, and then I've rejigged it and done whatever needed to be done to get it to work. So that's my
Take your credit. Take your credit.
and thank
what was
you.
quite funny is when we released the PDF, the alpha PDF, we hadn't got around to doing the index, and it was just something else at the time, and a couple of people got really angry at us because it was useless. It's useless, but they haven't said anything about it since it actually exists now. I don't know whether
they have said that they want a bookmarked PDF, which I'm working on.
Yes.
Well, that'd be nice.
Yes, that would be awesome. Yeah. That was.
And I will get it working. Then the next version of the PDF will be updated once my other tasks are off the table, which are numerous. But after they're off the table, the bookmarked PDF will be out.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the GM screen. My son was rooting around the other day and he found the GM screen. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a 4-panel screen. It has this amazing piece of artwork with these poor operatives that have been ambushed by all manner of nasties from the world of Progress. And when my son saw this, he went, that would make an awesome movie, because it has a very cinematic feel about it. There's a stormer about to punch a greater carrion in the face and all sorts of stuff going on there. But the GM screen, it's suitably thick. Some GM screens nowadays are a bit kind of flimsy.
It'll stop a blitz around, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you say it's cinematic. One day I will tell you the trip of Dave and Jared go to Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
You're on.
We did that 10 years ago and nothing came of it. But we were invited out and we stayed with a Hollywood producer for 2 weeks trying to organise it. Just couldn't raise enough funds.
The next Kickstarter.
It's just thinking that.
No. Well, no, there's no... The one thing that we've learned from our miniatures foray, we should stick to doing what we do best. We're very good at role-playing, even if we say so ourselves. 1,200 backers agree with us. We're very good at doing this. That's what we should do.
What we normally do, because I'm conscious we're running up to time, is you've been great guests, and thank you very much for all the anecdotes and the behind-the-scenes looks that you've given us. In recompense for having to put up with our chutney, tell us about some projects you've got coming up in the future. I know, for example, you've got the Terminator role-playing game coming up, but what else have you got coming up?
The Terminator RPG should be launching this month, end of February, and we're very excited about that. And we think it's going to be awesome. Lots of it'll follow a similar pattern with regards to how the Kickstarters run as we did with the Slay one. And then we've got 2 other projects in our pipeline. The first one is the next part of Slay. So for those people that have bemoaned the fact that Slay doesn't come out very much, you can expect a new Kickstarter in June. And what I will say is, if you look in your books, in the first page, big black and white page on, I think it's on page, where are we? It's called The Opposition,
6.
the pages in question.
5 and 6, is it?
5 and 6. Let's just say the next Kickstarter starts with the letter C.
Thank you for that.
That's that. We're hoping that we will also be producing the first of what we're calling our splat books, which is basically character sort of species driven. So we've selected 2 of the species that we want the playable characters. So to give you a list of the name, you've got the humans, you've got the frothers, you've got the ebonites, you've got the Shakhtar, you've got the Wraithen, the advanced carrion, the stormers, the neophron. 2 of those have been selected and will feature in a 2-part book with great depth on them and their nature.
To reassure people, the Terminator Kickstart will not impact the work on any Slay books.
This is a really good point, actually. So what we're doing is Dave has naturally taken ownership of Slay production, and Slay, he's basically the project manager for Slay, and I am doing the same job but for Terminator. And we're hoping that given the finances that we hope that we will garner by continuing to do a good job, that Jared will then take over the 3rd project, and then I will take over the 4th project, and then Dave will take over the 5th. So the 3 of us over a year will in effect produce a project each at minimum. And then obviously if we do get big enough that we take on more project managers, you can expect a 4th project, a 5th project per year, depending on how it works.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, one sort of closing thing I'm going to go for here, we talked about it briefly earlier. You mentioned Progress Report 3. So for those of you listeners who have not yet seen it, the Nightfall crew produce these Progress Report magazines. You get them in Drive-Thru RPG, and they include things like fiction, they include new antagonists, generally new stuff you can put into the world of Progress. I like to think of them, they're almost like mini karmas. They have that sort of breakdown of bits and bobs for your world of Progress. Can you give us any inkling as to what might be in Progress Report 3?
We can.
We can, yes.
So we've got a story written by a gentleman who's part of the Terminator rules writing team, and his name's Bart, and he's written a very nice, very short story called Incense and Cordite. We have in-depth details around the Vever fonts and what happened to them. We also have a 5-part campaign seed for using the Vever fonts in the game, including rules.
I made a noodle bar. We have a noodle bar. There you go. Seriously, I'm giving you a noodle bar. That's all you're getting from me. There is a SLA Industries Discord that we do not run, that we allow, it's the wrong word. There's a SLA Industries Discord that we're happy to visit. And on there, I was having a chat about CS1 and how underrated the book is. And I thought ideas of a campaign and thought all these war movies are like that would just drop in straight to be Cannibal Sector 1 scenarios. And I've got the seed for a campaign, the introduction for a campaign that I hope to drag out over Progress Reports 3, 4, and 5 and maybe onwards. Just little ones, little bits. Think of a war movie. There you go. There it is.
In 2nd edition, we've got a double-page spread about the pit as well. And when that was originally written a long time ago, it was more sort of like about the structure and the nature of it. But as we got towards the end of the book, we realised that we'd much rather tell you all about the music of the pit, including Shakhtarian Death Ballet or whatever it was called. I forget now. But
Shakhtarian Folk.
That's it, Sectarian Folk. So the writing that was going to go in there, we're also putting into Progress Report 3 as well. So it's got, I think it's going to, I don't know, I mean, Jared, do you know yet how big this document's going to be? Because it's fairly
I should have a page count. Yeah, it's at least 16 pages, I'd say. More than that. But something like, I mean, expect it to be 12 to 16 pages and be surprised when it's more.
It's a good mix of stuff. And as you say, it's, in a way, it's the child of the Karma magazine approach, because, you know, these are things that we want to tell, but they don't necessarily fit in the books that are coming, including the Vever fonts, for example. I mean, I wrote. I really wanted to sort of tie them off, and
yes,
hopefully this does that. But obviously, they're not something that we want to talk about, particularly in a published book. But they're great for this situation.
The problem being is the SLA Industries second edition book was 224 pages, and it took almost exactly a year to go from Kickstarter to in your hands. If we'd have done as much as we wanted to do for the book, we'd still be on it now. I think it's become fairly clear through the discussions we've been having here why exactly we were really happy to get Mark in.
Because Mark makes
you
you
know
behave.
our strengths. One of the reasons that you survive this long is you learn your strengths, and you know your strengths, and you know when not to try to go outside your comfort zone. And we're really good at putting books together. Really good at that. We have role-playing books. We have to acknowledge that, but we also have to acknowledge where we're not good. And the fact that Mark can also write as well makes him, because if you got to be able to write if you've got to join Nightfall, that made it a very, very useful partnership.
What would be really interesting one day, and it doesn't really matter, but it would be really interesting to see if anyone could identify who the writer was from these books, because as I say, this book has got 4 writers in it. It'd be interesting to see if anyone could work it out. What was a Dave and Jared and what wasn't, maybe.
That's actually a very good point. What you see, I think it's one of the strengths that you've actually seen with SLA really since the beginning, is you guys are very good at using different voices. There are some companies that they have certain writers and you can tell when certain people are writing because of the style or the way the characters act or whatever. One thing you've done very successfully at Nightfall is you've managed to have different voices when they're required, and it's not always Jared obviously wrote that, because the characters always sound the same. Anyway, gents, on that note, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk with us. We've largely sat and listened because Jason and I certainly are huge fans of SLA Industries, so it's been great having this time. Thank you again, gents. This has been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you all the best with these Kickstarters that are coming up. And you're doubtlessly going to see me and Jason dropping a load of cash on them as well. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, before I go, I'd like to give a quick plug for Shep, who was the rules guy. He's got a Kickstarter out for the Gaia Complex. And also keep an eye on What Handiwork Games, who's John Hodgson, one of our closest friends. Handiwork Games and Nightfall Games spend a lot of time talking. Let's put it like that.
We should also probably mention our friend Steve Turner as well.
And of course, Steve Turner, Steve Turner was instrumental in the putting together of the deal that became Mark joining Nightfall.
Yeah, excellent,
brilliant stuff.
Yeah, our friends noticed as well.
Yeah, and thank you guys very much for this. Really appreciate it, and it's been a joy. I hope we haven't rambled too much.
Not at all. No, this has been a real pleasure for us.
Are you sure it's not SLA?
And that was our SLA Industries Roundtable. Thanks again to Jared and Mark from Nightfall Games for taking the time to indulge us. It was a pleasure having you on the show, gents. If you've not already done so, please take the time to check out Nightfall's Terminator Kickstarter. We're sure it's going to be a great game. Likewise, all the supplements we've talked about in the podcast, the Cannibal Sector 1 rulebook, the main SLA Industries rulebook, and the various progress reports can all be found on Drive-Thru RPG. Just search for SLA Industries. We're a monthly podcast about the history of tabletop role-playing games. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at SavePodcast, or you can mail us at roll.to.save.pod@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Roll to Save. If you enjoyed what you listened to, please leave us a review on your podcast directory of choice. Those 5 stars really do help towards visibility, and we appreciate each and every one we get. Thanks again for listening, and we'll speak to you again next month.